I cannot be the only person in this world who hates two things. One, death, for it slows me down. And two, the inability in Path of Exile to use a single character for all content. I hate gem swapping. I hate flask swapping. And I hate swapping to a different character for different content. If you are with me, make sure to stick around. Check the time codes in the description box below, as well as potential links. Otherwise, I have a treat for you with my favorite skill once again, Forbidden Rite, as well as an ascendancy that I've never really touched, the Pathfinder. Shout out to Ruetoo for showing me the righteous path of what can happen if you have over 300 plus divines invested into a single character, which we do not have. I was able to make a much more amicable budget version that is able to do all content, including Ubers, if you know what you're doing, but I'm still fine-tuning and tweaking things to make it a little bit more amicable. So this is a work in progress, just so you know. But without further ado, allow me to show you some gameplay. Now, in this gameplay, I will show you how tanky this character is. This is a Simulacrum 30. I open up with some Forbidden Rite action here, but soon, roughly around about now, you can still see things dying, but I'm not fighting anymore. I'm just tanking. I'm standing still, not doing anything in the Simulacrum 30 right up until the boss shows up, and then I chicken out because I don't want to die. I had an incredible run so far, and I want to make sure it ends on a bright note. Now, the cast on damage taken effect that I have that will facilitate some of my recoup or my ability to heal on hit through my vitality on my Watcher's Eye actually can generate enough poison damage to actually kill units relatively simple on a Simulacrum 30, which is impressive in its own right. So yes, you can defend yourself by literally standing still and not fighting back. On top of that, as you can see, it actually does handle single target pretty well. Some of the modifiers on this Simulacrum 30 do gimp my damage massively, because a lot of the damage is not only poison, but it's also courtesy of the curse effect. So we do have good damage. It is the weakest part of this build, with only 15 to 20 million single target DPS, which I can double with a couple of good investments. But the main focus on this particular build, unlike the Arakali build that I have done previously, was defenses. And speaking of defenses, certain mechanics I find very frustrating to dodge. Ironically enough, I was trying to show off here how difficult it is sometimes to dodge these balls, but I realized by standing still, most of them are simply gone, which is impressive. But when I do take one, it barely affects me. I heal it back up without even having to do anything. And this is like the weaker version of the recoup, because we don't have something as insane as a stasis prison. We are simply using the doubleganger's guise. However, though I am tanky, I am not invulnerable. I was trying to see if I could survive it somehow. Turns out the mechanics that you are supposed to avoid, because they will one-shot you, will still very much one-shot you. So be wary of that if you're trying to think that this is somehow a super character that can just tank Maven memory games and whatnot. No. It can handle every single mechanic in the game that I've tested so far, with the exception of dealing with these one-shot mechanics. And of course, you do learn from your mistakes, and you just run to the side, and it's pretty much over like that. Now, I have not been able to test this particular boss in Uber just yet. So I'm still trying to fine-tune my damage. I think I have the tankiness, I just don't feel comfortable enough with my damage. However, speaking of damage and mapping, it is incredibly smooth. I'm using the Gathering Wind, Flesh and Fire jewels, so that gives me a bunch of action speeds, which is actually, ironically, is less damage for me right now than something like Way of the Poacher, but we'll go through that in just a second. Now, one of the things that I do enjoy doing is being able to map smoothly. The fact that we have these explosions, we can still tank everything that gets thrown at us. As you could see, we just tanked a bunch of ice circles. We stood in the middle of it on purpose to see how it would feel, and we didn't even flinch. And that was without the shrine. Now we have a shrine, so I believe I tank another one shortly. But as you can see, the clear is phenomenal. The character moves super quickly, and this is all, by the way, without a movement skill like shield charge. So this is all just pure walking. as well as the tanking is done without any kind of guard skill. No Molten Shell, no Immortal Coal, no Second Skin or whatever it's called. That one that stops the bleeding. Nothing like that. This is pure, constant defense, regen, recoup, and whatnot. It's an incredible experience being able to actually enjoy the game and stand in the middle of danger and not have to worry about death finding you. Now, the occasional modifier on these altars can still do your head in, so it's not like you are completely 100% safe on this budget. But considering it is budget, and I use that term loosely because I have crafted some phenomenal things that if I were to sell them would give me double or 3 times the price that they actually cost to craft. I am incredibly impressed so far, and this is my favorite build that I have played in a very, very long time. All right, so let's talk about the interesting stuff, the gems that we are using, the gear we are using, as well as the passive tree. We're going to rush it through it quickly because the POB link is in the description box below. But I'll just kind of give you some small explanations as to why, in case there's any confusion. Otherwise, make sure to check out the Discord or hit me up on stream. Now, in the helm, we have an Enlightened, Malevolence, Purity of Elements, and Divergent Herald of Agony. The Divergent Herald of Agony is important to make the build function due to the fact that it allows you to get 100% poison to hit. Should speak for itself. In our knife, our rune dagger, we have Vitality level 1. This is not for the regen. This is to trigger our Watcher's Eye, which is in our passive tree. We'll show you that in just a second. We have a Despair, which may confuse people, but this is the Despair we hard cast. It's the Q1, which allows us to trigger a jewel, a unique jewel we have in our passive tree as well. Other than that, it doesn't really do anything. You don't even have to hit this on an enemy. It's just there to trigger that particular jewel. Flame Dash is our movement skill. Should speak for itself. We have Temporal Change. We have another Despair, the Anomalous Despair, the real Despair, on a cast when damage taken. This is constantly getting triggered as a result of us hitting ourselves with the Forbidden Rite, as well as enemies hitting us. And this allows us to do a stupid amount of damage due to us being a poison build. Speaking of things that are stupid, if you want to go fast, if you want to go real fast, Divine Blessing, Increased Duration, Inspiration, and Haste. This allows us to make sure to go fast all the time. Now, you may wonder why we can't cast Haste right now. Well, that's because in combination of the Flasks that we have here, as well as the Boot Enchant, if we hit ourselves, all our spells become free. And then we can just cast indefinitely. Which is really, really good. The only thing that are, only spells that are not free are, I believe, are curses, which is why we do have to have some mana to start the cycle, as well as to be able to afford them. But otherwise, everything else is pretty free as long as we have recently hit ourselves. Yes, unfortunately, the boot enchant is mandatory as a result, as well as the flask. Speaking of the boots, we have a Purifying Flame Divergent. If you don't have a Divergent, you don't need the Purifying Flame, because it's just there for the Consecrated Ground alt quality effect for more damage. Blazing Salve is here for more spell hits that will trigger our on-hit healing through the Vitality's Watcher's Eye. Cast when damage taken. Well, if we are hurting ourselves, we are casting these things automatically, so we don't have to think about it. As well as if we get hit, they get automatically fired and heal us, which is great. And then the Onslaught facilitates a permanent uptime of Onslaught against unique enemies and such, where if we are just mapping, we have guaranteed Onslaught through the boot. So that should speak for itself. Let's do some Flasks. Progenesis is broken. I expect this to be nerfed. Taste of Hate will help facilitate cold protection, as well as some physical protection. Alchemist's Quicksilver Flask of the Order is a mandatory flask because of the reduced mana cost of skills during effect, but also because of the increased effect. This allows, in combination, as I said earlier, with the boot enchant, to make everything free. Dying Sun should speak for itself. More projectiles, more AoE, more fire protection. This is the only flask that is flex. You could put in a Topaz if you want. I went for an Alchemist Jade of the Order to get some more regen, because once again, we don't have a stasis, so we need to get that recuperation, that life gain elsewhere. And I found this to be very, very good to really sustain in those incredible overwhelming numbers because of the evasion effect. We have a little bit of evasion from our gear, a little bit of evasion scaling on our passive tree. So this worked out really well. But you can also just use a topaz flask if you're just terrified of lightning. Like, there's nothing preventing you from doing this. Also, if you have a micro distillery build with increased flask effect and charges gained, you could also just not run this and spec into the trader on the passive tree using the brutal restraint jewel and get flask charges that way, which you have to do anyway if you don't have access to the sanctified relic of the untouchable. Now, granted, I say untouchable, it's really just a refilling sanctified relic. Nothing else on this relic works for this build because we're already ailment immune through our purity and divine shield. Nobody cares. I wanted this to be a mage bane. Sadly, I have not found a new relic yet to put mage bane on. But yes, in a perfect world, we would flask gain 2 charges every 3 seconds and we would have mage bane. My goodness, if we had mage bane, I would be so excited. Because, taking a look at the passive tree, if I had mage bane, I could unspec some points. But yes, we have some interesting things in the passive tree. We have 2 large clusters, 1 medium clusters. This medium cluster is mandatory because it gives you spiked concoction. It is I believe it's just a increased flask effect duration. Gives you spike concoction. The second notable is the best one out there for this build, in my opinion, which is just a big life one. For 1.8% maximum life is pretty good. Here we have the Balance of Terror. As you can see, inflict wither for 2 seconds on hit if you cast Despair in the past 10 seconds. That's why we have the hard cast Despair, because triggering Despair does not trigger this particular jewel. I'm looking to upgrade this to a double Despair, so I'm also curse immune, but until then, it is what it is. Speaking of things that are what they are, we have a Vitality here. Gain 27 life per enemy hit while affected by Vitality. That's why we are using this, because we are generating so many hits with Forbidden Rite, Blazing Salvo, even Purifying Flame, and all these effects that we can generate hundreds, if not thousands, of healing per enemy's hit during mapping or during certain events that we can sustain. If we don't get one shot, we can just recuperate, regain life up to full in a matter of like less than a second. A fraction of a second. It's really, really good. In a perfect world, you wouldn't need this because you would have a stasis prison. And you could be able to run a Watcher's Eye that is double purity of elements. Or even in a perfect world, you would be able to run this Watcher's Eye with a third mod that is purity of elements based. It does exist on the server. It does, but it's 100 divine. So if anybody has a small loan, by all means, pop off. We pick up the extra curse here because we are using 2 curses. A little bit of crit damage reduction as well, because every enemy we will see or fight is going to be cursed anyway. You do have to pick up the Serpentine Spellslinger as well as the chance to poison. I'm picking these 2 nodes up here to get more cast speed as well as some increased damage. You don't have to pick these up. It's just more damage if you are still working on making your build function. Every single life node is more health and more tankiness. And also more damage due to the way Forbidden Rite works. So we pick up all the life nodes we can. A little bit of a gem socket here. Or, a little bit of gem for the Viridian Jewel, which allows us to have more life, a little bit of recoup, a little bit of chaos damage, solve any of the issues we might having. Oh, look, it's more sustain on kill for mapping, but more importantly, every point here is 6 maximum life, which is very, very valuable. We pick up some more poison chance to hit here, as well as a nice inflict faster, which is really important because the temporal change slows down the poison really quite a bit, actually. So anything you can do to inflict faster poison is really, really good. And other than that, we pick up some more flask nodes over here with the Flask Mastery for more charges. This is why we are able to maintain fully. More life nodes, more flask recovery rate, more flask mods. As our flasks are constantly cycling, we're also removing maim and hinder constantly. With this particular setup and the particular things that I own, you can actually run 5 flasks. If you, however, run 4 flasks, you can unspec this minor node here. You can unspec these 3 nodes here and just pump them into more life or perhaps another jewel socket. We do need to run Entrench with 2 minor nodes there. One is Travel. One of them is necessary to cap our spell suppress for real. If we had Mage Bane, we can unspec this, as I said earlier, I believe. And then we have another life wheel right here together with a life mastery. And here, once again, same thing, just more flask effect and more life. The theme should be quite clear. Flask effect, flask mods, and life mods are pretty much good to go. Luckily enough, we do have this Brutal Restraint, which is phenomenal. 1782 is probably one of the best ones you can get. In PoB, you can find other ones with that calculator, but this one is so good because we also have the ability to blind enemies, as we have a little bit of evasion in our defensive layer. This is really helpful, as well as increasing our flask charges, allowing us to run 5. But once again, if you want to run 4 and spec into the trader, you don't run this. You do run everything else because you get more damage with poisons here, cast and attack speed, some poison faster damage, which is incredible. Here we also have increased effective non-curse auras, which is just phenomenal. So you kind of get a good idea of what the build really is. Just one more thing, these large clusters, they are not necessary to be rolled with +3 all elemental resistances if you run these particular flasks. It is helpful in the early stages. Otherwise, I do believe, depending on how you craft your rings or your helm, you do need attributes from one large cluster. That's one of the things that I ended up walking into prior to my ring craft. But the things you're looking for, mandatory is Unspeakable Gifts for clear. That's how we get our explosions on both clusters. Otherwise, Unholy Grace, I believe, for single target. But I would recommend Unspeakable Gifts. On top of that, Touch of Cruelty is okay. It's not as much damage as it normally would be because we do have a massive Wither with our Anoint as well, which is the Corruption. So this is not that big of a damage increase. And then we also have Unwavering Evil. If you can, the perfect combination would probably be Unspeakable Gifts, Unwavering Evil, as well as Wicked Pal, because these have like 30% increased scales damage, both of them. And you get a little bit of skill effect here as well, which also is a little bit of quality of life, possibly. Anyway, it speaks for itself. You can check out the POB in the description box below, but honestly, this has been my build so far. There are some big upgrades that I'm looking forward to. Getting a better shield, improving my weapon. I might getting a better terror jewel, getting a better amulet, maybe even a better chest. Maybe I should start saving up for that stasis prison. But either way, in this current form, it roughly took me about 200 to, 150 to 200 divines less to be able to get the build to really, really feel good and feel really, really strong. So if you like what you're seeing here, let me know. Links are in the description box, as well as the time codes if you want to revisit some stuff. Otherwise, hit me up on the Discord and check out the stream. Have a good rest of your day. Thank you so much for watching. And as always, I'm out.